I think we are ready to start. So
Okay.
I'm taking this microphone to our president of APAMEI, Dr. Flor Miranda, and she can lead this session. Welcome.
May I now call on Bishop Nakpil to lead us in the opening prayer? Bishop Nakpil.
Almighty God, our Heavenly Father, we thank you for gathering us together again to think about
I think there is little technical, the internet problem.
and great toward us. So that we and engaging here with this visitors, nurse, healing.
Bishop is muted.
Yeah, I think there is a little connection problem. So President, you can move on.
Okay.
And I think we prayed with.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Yang Min. And thank you, Bishop Nakpil. At this point, may I say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in your part of the world. Thank you for joining us once again in our November forum. And, last November 25, the UN started its celebration for the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. And that is supposed to end or culminate on December 10, which is the Human Rights Day. And we are very honored to have with us in our midst this morning, afternoon, or evening, an empowered woman and a leader who will say his piece and her perspective on the matter. But before that, may I call on another leader and empowered woman to introduce her. And she is the chair of the Biotechnology Department of Isabella Thoburn College and also a board member of the Asia Pacific Association of Methodist-Related Educational Institutions. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Nirja Masi.
Thank you, President Flor. And am I audible?
Yes.
I bring greetings to you all from Isabella Thoburn College, and I will not take much of our time, and I will straight away introduce our dynamic speaker of the day, Mary E. John. She is professor at the Center for Women's Development Studies, New Delhi. She was director of the center from 2006 to 2012. And before that, the Deputy Director of the Women's Studies Program at the Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi from 2001 to 2006. Her recent publications include Discrepant Dislocations, Feminism Theory and Post-Colonial Histories, 1996, republished in 2021, A Question of Silence, The Sexual Economies of Modern India, co-edited in 1998, new ebook edition republished in 2021. Women's Studies in India, a reader 2008, the co-edited volume Women in the Worlds of Labor, Interdisciplinary and Intersectional Perspective 2021. The book Child Marriage in an International Frame, a feminist review from India. She was the co-chair of a task force set up by the University Grants Commission to look into sexual harassment on Indian campuses and brought out the report Saksham, Measures for Ensuring Safety for Women and Programs for Gender Sensitization on Campuses in 2013. Mary John has been conducting a range of field-based researches on themes relating to family and marriage. She has brought out several reports on adverse child sex ratio and gender-biased sex selection, planning families, planning gender, sex ratios and gender-biased sex selection, history, debates, and future directions, and political and social economy of sex selection, exploring family development and linkages. So, ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together and welcome Mary E. John. Over to you.
Well, thank you so much for that very, very warm and far too extensive, far too long introduction. I'm really honored to be invited to your association in your monthly forum. It is really a new experience for me to be addressing participants from the Asia Pacific region. I have had some links with these regions, and I was just talking to Nirja about it. There are women's studies associations, and one of them is in fact based in Ewha Women's University in Korea. And I have had the good fortune of interacting with them. Some of the professors there, Professor Kim Yoon-shil in particular, is someone I have interacted with over the years. So this is yet another, and I do believe that inter-Asia connections are really, really important. Very often we either insular in India, especially, we tend to concentrate more on our own internal issues, or when we make connections, we make them with Western locations like the US or Europe. So I really value this chance for a conversation with you all about some of the issues that we have in India, and I think I will benefit from your thoughts at the end of it. So without further ado, let me begin. And thanks, I should say, to Nirja in particular, who contacted me and who is going to help me today. I get very nervous if I'm having to share my own screen, so she has consented to help me here. So yes, so my topic today is a kind of interwoven topic. It's actually trying to bring together a set of issues. Can I have the next slide, please? Yes. So in this presentation, this discussion on rethinking violence against women, which is a topic that has certainly seen a lot of attention in India, and I will be talking about that. At the same time, I want to set a context for this discussion, and I'm going to do this in two ways. One is in relation to higher education, and I think this might interest you all because I imagine many of you are located in institutions of that nature. I don't know. I mean, Isabella Thurban, of course, is a very well-known women's college in India, but I imagine many of you are located similarly in institutions in your respective countries. So I want to bring the issue of education into the picture, higher education more specifically, as well as the question of work. And I think some of these are not, in fact, on our agendas enough in India. So I will begin with the question of higher education. Next slide, please. Okay, so I don't want to, I use numbers. I hope that's not going to be a problem, but sometimes it helps to put things in perspective very quickly with just some numbers. As you all know, we're a very large country. We're well over 1 billion people. So I won't go there at all, but we have a growing and large higher education sector. We have, believe it or not, we have about 900 universities. We have about 10,000 colleges. And the numbers are growing all the time. And in terms of, again, just a quick number, we have about 38 million students in higher education, most of them, of course, at the undergraduate level. So just to give you, just for starters, to give you a sense of where the women are here, we were independent in 1947, 1950, we had our, constitution and a republic was created. At that time, we had barely 100,000 students in any, higher education institution, college or university. And out of those, 10% were women. Okay, so 10,000 women in our colleges, you could say, in 1950. And by 2001, when incredible expansion has taken place, the number has already leaped to 40%. And I'm looking at All India Survey of Higher Education data, which comes out every year. By the most recent data of last year, it's jumped to, not jumped, I would say it's crept up, it's moved up from to 47.6. And this is very close to parity. This is practically half. And of course, there's a lot of variation when we look at the location of the institution in question. In the engineering institutions, it drops. There are many more men than women. And if we go to some of our undergraduate colleges, which are more social science oriented or humanities oriented, it goes higher. If you go to a Bachelor of Education kind of context, the numbers may even be 80 to 90%. So there's a lot of variation. I don't mean to present a wrong picture. This is an average I'm speaking of, but I am trying to indicate to you all, and this is, I think, maybe unique to India. I would really be very happy to hear from all of you about other contexts. I think this is the only space in our country today where there is anything like this kind of parity on gender terms. That is to say, where if you come to India, you will see when you come to our colleges and universities, that's where you'll see very, very large numbers of young women. You won't see them in too many other spaces. It's special and unique, and I don't think that we have actually reflected on that enough. It's been happening quietly. Sometimes I've called it a silent revolution, in the sense that just these numbers have grown, as I said, in the last 50, 60 years. And I think this needs a closer analysis. Can I have the next slide, please? So I'm just to give you an idea, there is these figures, by the way, are in the nature of cross enrollment ratios. So I'm using different kinds of sources, and don't at the numbers themselves. This gives you an idea. We have a very strong caste system, as you know, and it hasn't disappeared in modern times. We have what are called scheduled castes, the so-called, what used to be the outcasts. We have other backward classes, which are other lower castes, and then we have upper castes. And these figures are just meant to give you an idea of how the gross enrollment ratios do vary. So these averages that I'm giving you have a lot of variation. And I'm giving you some figures here to show you what they are amongst different caste groups amongst men and what they are amongst women. And just for you to notice that when you reach the upper castes, if you look at these figures, the figures between upper caste men and women are practically the same gender, the same enrollment ratios at 31%, whereas otherwise you see a little bit of a disparity. You see that the women's figures are less for women than for men, and these are more disadvantaged groups. Next slide, please. Okay, again, I don't want to overload you, and we'll move. Can you give me the next slide after this, actually? Okay, just so that you're not overloaded with numbers, I thought you might find these figures interesting. We also collect data based on religion. I don't know whether you're aware, but in our country, we have about 80+% are Hindu, return themselves as Hindu. About 13% are Muslim. Christians are 2.2% or so. And Sikh are now, I think, about 1.8. And there are other smaller groups, Buddhist, Jain, and so on, which numbers are very low. So I'm giving you, these are old figures now. This is work I did some time ago. And the numbers would have increased to some extent from those times. But here again, you see very sharp differences and also some unusual gender proportions. So amongst the Hindu, of course, is a very large, 80+% includes the various castes that I spoke of in the previous, just a little while ago. So there's a tremendous difference between upper castes and lower castes. So this is an average. Women a little bit less than men. Muslims are amongst the most poorly represented in higher education. They're also amongst the most disadvantaged in our country. overall, and you can see the numbers here. Christian, you will see are considerably higher. We are, I would say Christians are amongst the more educated in our country, thanks to a history of access to education. Notice, I thought this might interest some of you, that the percentage of women is slightly more than that of men. And this happens in some of our contexts. And the Sikh community in particular has a very sharp, very peculiar, you could say, difference where women are much more present in higher education than men. Men tend to leave after high school and take on other kinds of work. Women stay on. So this is one of those anomalies, you might say, but this gives you a quick sense of the religious differences. Next slide, please. So we are now, so I'm just coming back to the point I made earlier, that we have seen tremendous expansion in our higher education. The breakups have also improved, even across castes. The kind of problems across castes have become better, not so much amongst Muslims. I would say that Christians are close to being in the right level of representation in terms of population, though I should also add here that amongst the Christians, there are sharp differences. Many Christians come from Dalit communities and have not seen the kind of advantages that others have seen. So we too have internal differences which translate into differences in access. Upper castes are still overrepresented in our country in terms of access, but all the same, women are almost half. Women are almost equal in terms of their representation across all these groups. And this is happening even as in our country, higher education has been largely state-led. So most of our major universities are actually public universities supported by the central or state governments. But actually, there has been privatization, growing numbers of other kinds of philanthropic or commercial. And this has been going hand in hand with the expansion of in the numbers. Next slide, please. So this is the context. I set a context here, and you know, Nija mentioned this in her introduction to me, that, you know, after, and I'll talk a little bit about this, about the gang. I think this was news for everybody. In December 2012, we had a particularly horrendous case of violence, a gang rape of a young woman in Delhi who had traveled on a bus, took a bus at night and was gang raped, and she fatally, it was a fatal case because she was so brutally attacked that she died. This became, I think, big news, I think, everywhere, and there were huge protests. This somehow struck a chord. There have been many cases, but this one struck a chord with the public, with the media, and she became something of a celebrated case. The people were you know, the perpetrators were taken to book. Some of them had in fact been hanged already for the act. That's not actually the direct. The interesting thing to me was that after this event, those of us who are part of women's groups and women's organizations, we have been active on the issue of violence for a long time. We have been changing the laws to make them more equal. We have been making sensitization more broadly. So this is not a new topic for us. We have been looking at this from the 70s onwards. But somehow post this case, 2013 onwards, there was something that got reignited, you could say, in the public eye. The UGC, the University Grants Commission, called upon some of us to form a task force, asked us to look into what is the condition. This young woman was a student. I think she was studying physiotherapy. So they asked us, what's going on in your colleges, in your universities? Do you have mechanisms to tackle issues of discrimination and violence against women? So we undertook a kind of open, we looked into the matter. We started an inquiry, and we were shocked actually, because this was done in 2013, many decades after we thought we had actually discussed these things quite a lot. We discovered that many of our institutions were actually quite indifferent or even confused. I don't know how your situation is, but you know, when we went around the country and we did surveys, we talked to some of our administrators, and we had some very, first of all, many of them didn't even have any kind of mechanisms for handling cases of complaint. Many of them said that they didn't even apply to them. that they didn't think they needed to have one. And some of them were extremely conservative in their views. I mean, I'll give you one example, which was a college who told us that, girls and boys don't mix, and that's the best way to deal with the subject. And we have a library, which is a common space for them. So we have separate stairs for the girls and the boys. And we were shocked. We were absolutely shocked that this was thought of as a good mechanism, as it were, to prevent any kind of untoward. So I'm ashamed to say that this is 2013-14 in India, modern India, that administrators could actually imagine that such a way of dealing with things is actually a way forward. So there was a lot that came out. A lot of issues did come to the floor. I think somebody needs to mute their mic. Okay, no problems. Okay, so we were, as I said, we were very surprised by what we found. And we did find, when we spoke to young women, they were very eager to talk to us. They said, we live with some, it's very common, some form of, harassment in our lives. We take it more or less for granted. We just sort of live with it. We don't want to make a fuss about it. Better not to sort of speak out, because then you might have worse trouble after that. And of course, the problems are intersectional, in the sense that for young people coming from rural backgrounds, from minority identities and so on, disabled persons, all of them are even more vulnerable in contexts of this kind. So we did produce a report, that Saksham report, which came out and was quite, I think, widely shared once we did that. So next slide, please. Yeah, so there's no doubt there has to be, I don't wish to be misunderstood at all when I say that issues of violence are real. They're every day. They deserve attention. At the same time, I feel we need to rethink the place that is occupying my question is, to what extent has violence become the one and only issue in the public eye, and as requiring our redressal, our attention? First of all, I think there is everyday harassment in certain forms, but actually when we look at certain severe forms of harassment and violence, the kind that actually drew our attention after the gang rape, Delhi was called the rape capital of India because it happened in Delhi. I looked more closely at some of our numbers. I looked at our crime data and so on, and it is not the case that gang rapes happen all the time. It is not at all the case that this is, in fact, the form that violence takes. In fact, if you look at reported rape cases, 98% of cases are what we call acquaintance rape or known to the victim. In other words, it's not a stranger. It's not the kind of thing that happened in that horrible night of December 2012. It is actually people whom you know. It is even a relative. It is a neighbor. It is maybe a relationship that has gone very badly wrong. So we are looking at the norm and I think this is true across the world. We're not different from anybody else. The most common form of violence is actually from someone known to you. And I say this with some emphasis, because when we socialize and talk to people, when we talk to young people in particular, at least in India, I don't know how it is in your context, we always say to them, look, we say to young girls especially, don't go out at night, don't talk to the stranger, and we assume that everybody else is a safe person to be with. And I think that's not correct. I'm not trying to say that, you can be out and about any time of day or night and don't care about it. Of course, you should. But my point is that that's not necessarily the way where the worst dangers lie. And it's hard for us as teachers or as parents to acknowledge this fact, that that even homes and even our institutions are not necessarily safe. So it was this level of rethinking was necessary after the gang rape. In our statistics, for instance, domestic violence is by far the leading issue in terms of reporting crimes. This takes various forms and includes cruelty from family members and so on. Also, there are, I don't know, this may be peculiar to India, in a country where arranged marriages or where parents wish to play a very key role in arranging the marriages of their children. There are young people today who want to have, choose their own partner, and not necessarily in a way that the parents agree to. And some parents, but a good number, in statistical terms, it's a significant number of parents actually, when they oppose the choice of their daughter, actually lodge a case of kidnapping and abduction against the boy. And it's a category, it's an old colonial category, and unfortunately it's still there in our books. So I was shocked to discover that this is a category in our books where it's not a case of rape, but rather a case of parents opposing the choice of their daughter. So in the context in which we are in our country, where we do need to look at violence, we need to watch out, A, what are we talking about? Are we actually understanding the complexity of the situation? And B, are we maybe not looking enough at other issues? And I want to conclude with a next set of slides, please. Okay, so here I want to present you with what I think are the most shocking figures in our country, and they certainly I don't think they're true for you. We have some of the lowest work participation rates for women compared to men. I spoke in the beginning about the fact that our enrollment in higher education has improved. We are close to parity when it comes to women in our colleges and so on. But the story is very, very different when it comes to work. And these figures are over a period of the last, say, 10 to 20 years. You can see very clearly the differences between men and women. These are official statistics of work that is recognized as work for which you get some kind of revenue. So this is not the total amount of work that women are doing. That should be said right out. Women are working very, very hard, but not getting paid for what they do. I'm talking here about work for which you get some kind of acknowledgement, economic work. And notice two things here. One is actually two or three things. One is women much lower than men. The second is notice that the rates are coming down. This is the biggest shock of them all, that earlier years, 93, 94 compared to 2009, 10, and after that, it has gone down even more. We have just got some new data. Look at the numbers, they're going down. They're going down in both rural and urban contexts. And the other shock, I'm sure for most of you would be, and it was a shock for us, is that urban rates are much, much lower than rural rates. The usual assumption would be urban contexts give more opportunities for women to work, but that's not the case. Women are working in agricultural contexts as cultivators or as farmers, as field workers, and that gets counted more than the opportunities in our cities. Our cities, in fact, have fewer good working opportunities for women. The big ones in urban contexts are school teaching and paid domestic work. These are number one and number two. And this was, when I say this in context in India itself, my audience is shocked to hear this, because there's a public, perception that, we are globalizing, we are modernizing. You see women in TV, you see women in the media, you see women in finance. We have, famous women who are the heads of our bank, or head of the Pepsi. These are all women. So how can this be the case? So I need to then indicate that these are few and far between, and that in fact do not add up. Next slide. So I'm trying to now conclude here by looking at this deep paradox that characterizes a country like ours. Huge expansion in educational attainments, declines in work participation. So this is the biggest shock, that the last 20 years has seen declines. Fewer women in higher education, fewer women in workplaces. Only 15%, this is a very simple figure for you to have, that within all the work that women may be doing, only 15% of that work has any kind of paid payment attached to it by way of a salary or self-employment. So my concluding question really is, and this is what I throw out, is that when we talk so much about violence and the extraordinary vulnerability that follows from acts of violence, should we not also be looking at, and when we look at the fact that women are entering higher education, seeking obviously empowerment of some sort, that is not being reflected in their chances to have any kind of economic autonomy, which means that women are largely in situations of dependency. And my concluding question then to my audiences and to you all as well is, don't we need to put this in the mix? Don't we need to place this as much in our context if we want to sort of actually reduce violence, if we want to actually make women more able to stand on their own feet and respond? Don't we need to think of the other aspects of that as well? Thanks very much. Final slide. So thank you all, and I really look forward to your thoughts and your questions.
Thank you very, very much, Dr. Mary Jan, for that very substantial, thought-provoking lecture. And your lecture is very timely because 2 days ago, last November 25, we celebrated the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, or the IDVAL. So, and of course, we have a call, and our call is for the people of faith to work to change attitudes, beliefs, policies, and practices at all levels of society that dehumanize and promote the exploitation and abuse of women and girls. So again, thank you very much, Dr. Mary Jan, for that lecture. Now we are ready to entertain your questions, your reflections, and your sharing. You can encode your questions in our chat box, or you can use the raise hand button so that we could recognize you. Okay, anyone who would like to start the ball rolling? You can use the raise hand button for your so that I can recognize you.
I hope I haven't scared you all.
I'm interested to listen to the comments of our Chinese participants, since we have many Chinese participants here. Anybody who would like to share the situation in your country also? Or everyone is speechless? And we are still digesting. Okay, Dr. Yang Min Pike is raising his hand. Dr. Pike, you have the floor.
Okay, just thank you very much, for the nice presentation. My question is, I'm wondering why the woman's education did not connect it to the woman's employment. And what is the main reason, between those two facts?
Shall I respond right away?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so it's a really excellent question, and that's the one that's we call it a paradox, just to help us along and make us feel better about it. I think it's because the history of education in our country has actually, the link and the expansion has actually gone hand in hand with marriage rather than work. So we have a very complicated marriage society within which what we call arranged marriages, that is to say, a situation where parents do most of the deciding. They may not, it's evolved over time. It's not what it used to be. There were, the old story was, very, very young children, almost, very, small children even being married off. This was the social reform era, that's gone. I mean, we are now, I would say, teenagers maybe getting married. It's not small children any longer. But what has changed, so age has changed, qualifications for a good marriage has changed. So a good bride today is someone who is educated. So you go and get yourself a good degree, sometimes even a professional degree. But the main purpose of that, or the main end point of that, is to secure a good marriage, a secure marriage, with or without a dowry. And that, it seems to me, has not been dislodged. And the numbers of those, now I would say there's more negotiating going on. Young people want to have some say. And it's not, like I said, it's not like, the old days was sometimes you would see your husband or on the day of the marriage ceremony and you would have never met before. That is pretty much out of the question now. And you might even have arranged come love marriages, as they're called these days. Very, you bring the couple together and you spend time together and get to know each other and all of that. But that still remains the institution. And on the one side, and on the other side, we have an economy. And I really want to blame the economy here. It's not just the families. And that's where I think your countries in Korea and elsewhere, us and Japan, China, are so much better, because we have created an economy that creates far too few jobs. And the jobs that then are created are largely then men are then the primary ones. Even many men have terrible jobs. So it's not as though all men are getting great jobs. There's a hierarchy amongst in terms of work. There's a class structure in terms of work. But we in fact, the phrase we have used is we have jobless or job loss growth. That is to say, we grow, but the number of jobs we create is fewer than the number of jobs that are actually, marginalized and thrown out. So women are getting more and more educated, but they're not finding jobs, decent jobs. Like I said, school teachers, paid domestic workers. That's not what all you want to be able to do in life. So women are not finding work, and the marriage system in turn is getting re-emphasized as the source of economic security. So somehow we have not broken that. And I think all of our countries have been through histories of more traditional ways of being, but all of your countries have seen tremendous transformation in your workplaces, in the idea. I mean, China had its revolution. You've had your modernization in Japan and Korea, within which young women imagined themselves working after they studied, and then maybe finding partners or not. So that we have somehow, that link has not been made properly. And some of us, so there are poorer women who work because they have to work under very exploitative conditions. And some of us who look for careers who are fortunate to find them. But I have many of my relatives, many people in my world are what we would call housewives. Mm-hmm. And not often happily so. Sometimes they leave their workplaces and say they'd rather devote their attention to the kids. And again, don't mistake me. I believe housework should be work. I believe that what we do in the home is as valuable as anything that is done outside. Our societies would collapse without housework. But the idea that most women should only be doing that and find satisfaction there is, I think, not right. And that is unfortunately what we have in India. Very educated women not working, and poor women doing arduous work for which they get very little or no. So I think this, to my mind, I don't know if I answered your question. This, to my mind, is across different communities, it would vary.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Mary Chan. I will recognize Dr. Nirja Massive first, and then I will read the question in the chat box. So Dr. Nirja.
Thank you, Dr. Connie, for this opportunity. So thank you, Professor Mary John, for your very insightful talk, and the data that you have given has actually, like you said, that even Indians will also get shocked to see this data, that actually this is how we have progressed. And then I really realized that I am very fortunate to have lived in that part of India, or in that portion of India where I have lived the kind of life I have lived. But still, I would like to share with you people that when people are like, to tell you that, yes, I got commissioned in Indian Army. I served in Indian Army for 10 years, and then I left voluntarily to join this profession of teaching. So when I joined Army, then also people used to ask me that what motivated me to join Indian Army. And then even in the presence of my selection board, I told them I was already a commissioned lecturer that time. And I told them that because of the socializing that is happening around me in the culture, that yes, for women it is good to take up an easy job, a job which is less demanding, not administrative in nature, a job which is has got some regularity, like in the terms of, so that the idea behind is that a woman should give more focus to their family and less priority to their job. So like, as I would have thought that till the time I could do justice with my profession in India as an officer in army, I could give my 100%, I gave. And then I thought that when it was time to give, like, because most of the responsibility of giving a stable environment to the family lies on the shoulder of a woman. Actually, women, it is supposedly. So I voluntarily took release and I switched my job. So that would have been my career. And this is, I started from the scratch. So I am like 1 decade behind where I would have been. So this is the state of affairs. Like, I'm just trying to say that even if I feel that I am an empowered woman, I thought that I was, but the very reason that took me to take up a job in army or a career in army was also the same reason that I left that job. So this is something which I see around me also, and I'm sure it is also in majority of the cases. So it was just a sharing I wanted to do with you all to give you a clearer picture of what actually is. Thank you.
Dr. Chan, would you like to give,
Yes.
would you like to respond to the comment of
Yes,
Dr. Nirja?
No, that's a wonderful
不理解了，
share.
你说他下午上课去了。
Thank you, Dr. Masi, for sharing, because I think it really is illuminating. Number one, you see someone, and that tells you joining a profession that couldn't be more masculine. How many women would want to go into the army? I mean, and the Indian Army, which doesn't have the best of reputations, I can assure you. So a remarkably courageous person who, sometimes our patriotism is in question. Some of us minority women, minority groups, and I won't dwell on that more here. But here is someone who's, the ultimate act of courage to wish to defend the nation, should that be required. Though, of course, the army, we should understand the army in peacetime is also engages in many good things, developmental projects of many kinds. It's not just a fighting force, but here is someone who did that, who made that choice, and the reflection might include both sides. That is to say, what was it like to be a woman in a force of this nature, which is highly male-centric, highly hierarchical. Let's not, mince our words on this matter. I don't know how gender-friendly our army is. I really don't know that to comment on it. On the one hand, and on the other hand, I think both the things that Neil just said, the assumption that women's main responsibility is the family, that this is not something that can be shared. This is, and in India, I will say this, the best that we do is to delegate a lot of the work of the housework to other women. We pay domestic workers to do some of the work that we would rather not do when we are busy with our careers. So we have not evolved a better, how shall I say, division of labor amongst family members, or in terms of other kinds of more socialist, or more collective forms of sharing our work than those. So here you have an example of someone who felt that force of having to take a job. And why do you think so many women are school teachers? Because the timings work very nicely in terms of combining a career and going home by 3 p.m. or whatever, home to be able to start the duties of the house. And in India, I don't know, I'm sure it's true in many places, women will be getting up very early in the morning to get the day going, getting, lunch boxes put together, and then heading off to their colleges or schools, and then rushing back home at the end, by afternoon to take care of the next round of work. And men don't have those demands placed on them. They can stay back later in the day. They may have work that is long hours. And I think the interesting difference, and based on my visits to China and visits to Korea and so on, is that I think, and I would really be interested to hear from you on this, is there the same expectation on women to be able to handle everything, to be able to, or is there a situation, because I see women, in workplaces in China and Korea in the evenings, at night, in various kinds of contexts, in a way that we would not see so easily in India. So is there a difference then? Is there more equality at some level, at least in the workplace, that women, there's been a lot of debate. I listened to some of those debates because, news from Korea or Japan or China is news we are interested in, that is there more equality in terms of are women also being pushed back to the home under conditions of economic hardship? Is it better in that sense? Is there more willingness to, less of an assumption that women have to take care of everything in the home? I wonder about that. But thank you, Nirja, really. That was very helpful, I think, for...
Dr. Jan, there is a question here from Ekta Singh. A lot of changes has been seen in India and a lot of women's came in light. But what exactly can be done to overcome this current situation?
Well, yes, that's the $1 million question, right?
Yes.
Things need to be done. I think many things need to be done. One of them is to recognize the problem. If we don't recognize the problem, if people are not aware of it, and people think it's actually much better than it is, then the first thing we need to do is to create more awareness. And that's the sort of thing I engage in. The other is to actually make our government more aware of this, because I think it is government policies in your countries that has made the change happen. It is state level development in Korea, in Japan, in China, various kinds, that has actually played its part in creating work opportunities for women and has made that part of its policy. And we have not done that. What would it take for our governments to take a different part in their development and in their employment policies? We have to pressurize our policymakers here. And of course, we have to engage with ourselves. We have to engage with our families. We have to ask ourselves, what is it about our division of labor in the home and our assumptions that women will always manage it somehow? And that, we have to become super women, some of us. We have to go to work and come back and do everything at home too, like a double shift. It's been called a double shift. And I think we have in India lots of double shifts. What will it do? It was very interesting during the lockdown. I don't know whether you had similar experiences, but during the pandemic, we had periods of lockdown, which meant that there was a complete shutdown. Nobody could come and go. You had to be at home. And those families who were depending on paid domestic workers who used to come and go every day. So the paid domestic worker lives somewhere else, comes to your home, does some cleaning or cooking and so on, and then leaves. Now, under the pandemic, they could no longer come home. So suddenly these homes where the husband, the children, everybody was locked in at home because of the lockdown, and no workers coming or going. This created in some homes, this created a bit of a crisis, because then family members could see for the first time all the work that needed to be done, and the fact that women were having a hard time managing it all. So we heard stories of how some members of the family, husbands, some began to think about, okay, maybe they should also start helping out. And there were new kinds of, in India, we do a lot of the floor cleaning we do just with a piece of cloth. We take a cloth piece and we bend down and we clean the floors. And I think somebody was smart and came up with new kinds of, new technologies with these stand-up rooms, a mop and broom and bucket, as a new kind of technology to clean our houses for the men folk who'd rather stand up and do some of that work if they volunteered to do the work. So this was very interesting. This happened during the pandemic. And we did see a little bit of maybe more sensitive people saying, okay, let's do our bit now. I don't know whether it has produced a longer term change now that we are no longer in a lockdown mode, how much of that has been a lasting impact. But yes, we have to, it's a big thing, so it needs big changes.
Okay, thank you. So follow-up question from Dr. Yang Min. I saw he raised his hand a while ago, but I was not able to get back to him. So do you have any follow-up question, Dr. Yang Min, before we can hear feedback from our Chinese participants?
Maybe you can move on to the Chinese participant first, and then I'm going to gather up my question a little bit clear.
Okay. So we are requesting our Chinese participants to also engage with us in this very important conversation. Any representative from you?
Lisa, can you share about China's women's status or how women are regarded in China? Miss Lisa, are you there?
Yeah, Lisa Wang. Can we hear from you, Lisa? Yeah.
Where are the other Chinese students? What happened to you? I'm just wondering, Dr. Mary John, I think
Yes.
your third or second prime minister was a woman, that was Indira Gandhi, right?
Yes.
So I'm trying to connect. If you have such belief
Yes.
or such confident in a woman being a leader of the nation, how come from that time on, I guess that was in the 80s, right? Up to now, women are not yet given that status that you have accorded to Indira Gandhi. I'm just trying to make sense.
Okay. Yeah, no, many people ask us that question. And we've had, in fact, South Asia has had plenty of prime ministers who have been women. Bangladesh has had it. Sri Lanka has had. I think that's, it doesn't, first of all, Indira Gandhi was the daughter of Jawaharlal Nehru. Okay. It was a dynasty. She was a daughter, and subsequently her own son became the next prime minister. So somehow with the Congress party, the Indian National Congress Party with Jawaharlal Nehru, we started a dynastic form of rule. That is to say a family became, it was, the unusual thing is that often it is a wife. And I think, there are examples of that in, famous case of Aquino in Philippines and maybe examples like that. So she came as a daughter, and as a daughter, she's not there as a woman. She's not there as an empowered woman. In fact, she was particularly dismissive, if I may even put it more strongly. She was not a believer in women's rights, actually. She didn't think we needed that. She thought if you're good enough, you're good enough. You don't even need special, she was not, the UN Year of Women in 1975, she was not a votary for the UN Year of Women of 1970. Don't mind, I'm being a little frank here. She also gave us an emergency, a national emergency. She was a dictator at one point in her career. So we have to understand much more carefully women in power, which I believe we don't understand very well. And I think it's precisely because they're one, because there's just one of them. They have to fight to keep their status as a single person in such a way that being a woman has to be somehow written out of the equation. They have to prove that they're as good as any man, that they're as powerful as any man, that they're capable of doing even problematic things like suspend democracy, which is what she did. And it's the opposite of what we think of. Empowerment is a collective process. Empowerment happens when women come together and recognize where the disempowerment is coming from and what they need to do to try and name it and overcome it. She's not one of them. So I would say that single leaders, in my view, I may be being a little provocative here, but I don't think a good model for women's empowerment is single women leaders. They can be okay at best. They may have a certain charismatic value. They can, but it's not my model at all. Let me put it very simply. It's not my model. I think we believe in more collective modes of creating empowerment. We were actually very unhappy with Indira Gandhi.
Yeah, that was actually my question also, because I was in my elementary years when I learned about Indira Gandhi. So thank you for that, Dr. Mary Chan. Now I'm recognizing Bill Bai.
Yeah, I got a question here for so in India, there are women has been discriminated, okay, in the workplace or other sections. So what are the main cause of the women discrimination in India? Okay. So in all kinds of sections, okay, in the workplace or in the other places. And also there are domestic violence in India. Also is a complex issue, of course, you know, especially in the rural villages or, you know, in the city. So what are the causes of, you know, the frequency of discrimination and also the frequency of domestic violence? The main cause, please.
Okay. Actually, I think there are different kinds of causes. So I would distinguish between the fact that we have such a, that women's work is, let me put it this way, women are working, but they're not getting paid for what they're doing. Mm-hmm. So that's a little different, you know, so there's discrimination in terms of recognizing what women do. If tomorrow all the women were to say, okay, I'm going to stop working, since I'm not getting recognition, I'm going to stop working, society would collapse completely, but totally, right? So in fact, if you count all the hours that women put in our country, as in many other countries, the number of hours women work is more than the number of hours men work. The point is that it doesn't get recognized, it has no value. And many women will tell you that if they're not getting paid for what they're doing, if you ask them, are you working? They'll say, no, I'm not working. So there is a real issue here around lack of value. And that I think is a real issue. However, the violence question I think is a little different, because the two are not necessarily the same thing. The USA is a very violent country. Women are working. It's a very violent country. Many other countries are violent. I don't know your statistics to be able to speak to them. So violence is a very complicated thing. And I think you should, you know, let's think about what violence is. These are acts of aggression that we take out on each other. Now, I think that the violence in India is complicated because it's both, okay, men are aggressive and they're you know, some of it is men themselves taking out their own frustrations on whoever they can. You know, life is tough. Your job is horrible. You have not getting, you know, it's irregular. You're out of work half the time, and you take out your frustration on the women or the kids or whoever. So the lot of violence is complex violence, but some violence is also backlash. That is to say, we are aggressive to people who actually assert themselves. So we have example, and I think that example exists across the world. Domestic violence is very widespread. I really would like to, I don't know about how it is in your context, but in America, I've studied in the US, there's a great deal of domestic violence, or what we call intimate partner violence, where boyfriends take out their frustration and anger on their girlfriends. Plenty of that. So what's going on there? What is at the back of that kind of aggression? Is it simply that men are aggressive and that's it? Or are there other kinds of social reasons that make that happen? And So I would say in the Indian context, we have one, which is that we are not giving women their due. We are really not doing that. Women's value is simply not given its due. The fact that we work for little recognition only makes the problem even worse. And secondly, we have patterns of violence that are part of our dynamic of aggression that needs a separate set of analyses as well. I don't know if I've answered you.
Yeah, at least you can file divorce, like a divorce paper, at least, if you feel like, there are violences, between a husband and wife. Of
Yes.
course, you can file divorce, but here in the Philippines here, we can't file divorce. They're going to file annulment.
Yes.
That's the
Yes.
problem,
Yeah, no, that's very good answer, because women are in a situation of dependency economically, they can't divorce. So we have we have 98% marriage rate, 1 or 2% divorce rate. It's so low. It's practically, you see the point. So it's a very good point you've made. So you will have women walking in your country, you'll have women, they'll say, okay, enough is enough. I'm tired of being beaten up, and I'll go with my kids, and I'll go maybe to my parents' home, or I'll set up on my own. And they have some economic means of doing that. And maybe also some legal means of actually being able to handle that. We do have certain kind, it's not as though we don't have some laws that don't, but women going into divorce proceedings in our context is very few and very hard to do.
Well, in the Philippines here, it's harder. And in the Philippines, harder, of course, there's annulment only, so no divorce here. It's harder here.
Yeah. No, okay. So you might have separation, or you have other, not necessarily divorce, but separation.
Yeah, but it's a separation only. Yeah.
Okay. Thank
divorce,
you.
that's
That
a
was
problem.
Yeah. No, those are also complex questions. Yes. Thank you. That was very nice, Bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Bilbay. Now, shall we listen to Dr. Yang Min?
Yeah, I want to push a little further, with what
Yes.
Bill Bay, was asking, and also what Connie kind of posted up in the chat box. I'm
Yes.
thinking about, then what is the cause more seriously? We call that one as a patriarchy. And also, there is the reason why the gender law, was not set and not moving into the gender equality issue. And do you think, that is from some kind of culture caused by the religion or, anything? And because, we are the gathering of the educational institutions and also all the students, who are in the school. So I think to make this one transformed, and what kind of education or, focus, we need to take.
Yeah.
And that is something, I want to ask you.
Thank you. Yes, no, absolutely. The way we need to go. See, people say, oh, you have a very traditional culture, and it's a very, to my mind, traditions only continue when they are allowed to continue. Everybody's had a traditional culture. Everybody's, and I wouldn't say that any particular religion is more. Each religion has had its patriarchy. I mean, we can look at Genesis and see how patriarchal, our Bible has been. So I don't see any particular religion having a head start on anybody else here. I think that the nature of the reform. So I think all of our countries have been through processes of reform, change, revolution, and so on. And I think the version that we had, there was a lot of good things that happened in our social reform. Some of it was led by social reformers from various religions, including missionaries. We had missionaries who came and started schools. All kinds of things happened. But somewhere along the way, the idea that women's value was only to be there for the family, and that the larger economic and political system did not actually need to address women in terms of their own rights independently. I think somewhere along the way in countries like yours, it seems to me somewhere some aspect of that got addressed, so that there was a shift of some kind in the perception that the family isn't the beginning and end of a woman's life. And of course we had poverty. But so was, in the 1950s and 60s, a country like Korea was maybe as poor as India. And yet in the space of some, you modernized and did things. Of course, your numbers were much smaller, but I don't think that's the answer. You did things in a way that we never did. So yes, there are, I think, that's why, when you say Indira Gandhi and so on, I can't give you a good answer, because none of our leaders, male or female, none of them have really applied themselves to what kind of developmental path, what kind of state involvement, what kind of state participation, or from the corporate sectors, what do we need to bring everybody up, the poor as much as women, up to a decent level of participation in society. We never did that properly. And instead, we allowed this cycle to continue. So our marriage markets have expanded. We have the most, I don't know if you've seen any Indian films or, you watch any of this stuff. We have big fat weddings where, rappers are, come in by helicopter and to entertain the, whatever, the latest. Yeah. And I find it obscene. I really find it obscene because, enormous waste of money just to prove to everybody, wow, I've made this great match. And what happens after is anybody's guess. So there's something we badly missed on. And I think more focus. I think there is more focus than before. Don't get me wrong. But there isn't enough, and there isn't the will. And what can I say about that? Our governments do not have the will. Even today, and I'm willing to say so, we have governments that keep talking about population explosion. Today, when our numbers have come down, when the fertility rates are in India as well are below 2, all nations across the world are having fewer children. So the problem is not our numbers any longer, but that is still what we get to hear. So there is a big, big mismatch between the actual situation and what our policymakers are ready to listen to. And I'm ashamed to have to say so. But that is the case.
Let me comment, from the Korean situation a little bit, because I think the Korea still have a lot of problem about gender equality in comparison to most of the US and the American countries, European countries. But still, I can see the big difference has been made last like 20 years. Okay, when I grew up, we were exactly like you. Okay, but if you look at the society right now, still we have a lot of problem, but the society has been changed dramatically last 10 years. I think, today, a lot of people, if we are treating the woman differently and do not honor their housekeeping job and also not responsible, the man is doing some of the housekeeping job and they are feeling, that is a shame. And that is uncultured in some sense. So that kind of consensus was built up. And now that I think, that made the big change. And the woman's employment rate is going high. And they keep saying about the salary difference, between man and woman. And it has been transformed little by little. Yeah, what I'm trying to say is this. I think although it took for a long time, and it doesn't seem like, nothing is going on, but I think when the change comes in, okay, it changes dramatically in very quick fashion. And that is something, I want to say. And I have been very surprised because I, studied in US for a long time and came back only 10 years ago to Korea. And the Korea was a completely different country. And, after I left this country and stayed in US for 18 years and came back. So, that short time change has been big difference. I think there is the significance of the education, because the education, really made a big matter, for this one. And I agree with you, for all the things, what you have said. Okay, let me stop here.
Thank you very much. So I would like to recognize Ma'am Emeline Espinosa, and then I will go back to Dr. Nirja Masi after her. Ma'am Emeline, you were raising your hand. What happened?
Can I take the place of Emeline then?
Okay, sure.
Well, something popped up. Just 2 nights ago, I came across a documentary about contemporary Dalit in India. And I am just kind of thinking, is the caste system still affecting the way women are treated in India?
Okay, well, that's another very big question. Caste has not gone away, and just as, and I would say it in a similar way that I think that the fact that our and it was very interesting to listen to Dr. Pike on the Korean story and the changes, and the fact that education translated into something different on the ground and the differences he saw. We have had changes in education, and that has meant women entering. It has also meant changes for Dalits, our so-called outcasts, as they were called before, untouchables, now gaining entry thanks to government policies that did actually enable their entry through quotas. However, here too, we could say that it's been an incomplete process, you see. So you're seeing something changing. You're seeing women in educational settings doing very well, some of them more than men, some of them toppers in their subjects. We are seeing so-called Dalits, as they would prefer to be called, rather than called as outcasts, entering in smaller numbers thanks to reservations and sometimes on their own right. And we have Dalit Christians, by the way. I should say this too. And it's not been a very nice story always. I come from a state in South India called Kerala, where I'm ashamed of the Christianity that we have in Kerala, because there are separate churches in that state today for upper caste Christians and Dalit Christians. So there's nothing to be proud of here, that we still do that. So no doubt it continues. And one of the reasons it continues is that upper castes manage in their mobility stories, they manage to make the shift to better economically and socially better economic locations, whereas it's much tougher for Dalits, even when they gain entrance to education. How many of them are able to translate that into inclusion in the wider society? So there are, and the other, of course, the other group that suffers a lot are Muslims in our country. There's a lot of discrimination against Muslims. So supposing you're a Dalit family and you're middle class, and you come to a housing society, and people will ask, the owners will ask you questions about you. They'll try and figure out who you're from and where you're from and whether you eat this or that or the other. And they'll find ways to discriminate against you. So that continues to this very day. So we have, the list is a long one, let me say that. It's the awareness is more, that much I can at least allow for, and Dalits are fighting back also, but that also means the question of violence. There's a lot of backlash violence against Dalits who are seen to be too assertive. So upper caste think they're no longer keeping their place, so we need to teach them a lesson. That we do have as well.
Okay, shall we hear the follow-up question from Dr. Nirja?
So thank you, Connie, for this opportunity. And Professor Mary John, I have this observation, and I would like your comments on this, that the mindset is like, when we see that in the statistics that more and more number of girls are studying in education, higher education also, but when it comes to employment, they are less in number. Like even when I see that there are more number of girls doing research, but in the similar, they're employing as scientists or, as reaching the director's level or something is less. So my observation is that the men in India have a different set of standards for their own daughters and another set of standards for their wives, spouses. So what do you have to say about this?
That's a very nice observation. I do think that there are shifts happening, and that's why I don't want to place all the blame on the families. Also because, as I said, our family structures are changing tremendously. The number of children nowadays is coming down. Nobody wants to have more than one or two children. And some families may have only girls in their family, in fact, and not even a son. And that was also, I think, something we shared with Korea in the past, a very strong sense of son preference, that there has to be a son to carry on the family line. That has, I think, a little bit changed. But so yes, there will be some fathers and mothers. There will be many mothers, let's not forget the mothers, who will want something for their daughters that they didn't get. And that's where they hit up against what is available outside. What are the opportunities? I mean, you went into the army. Now, I don't know how many families today would imagine such a possibility. Most of them want to have a government job, by which they mean, sitting at a desk, and doing certain kind of thing from 9 to 5, or a school teacher. And there are only so many of those jobs. So there is a lack of imagination on our side, as well as a lack of opportunity. So I think many more daughters, you're absolutely right, many more families would want more for their daughters if those opportunities were available. And that's where I feel the economy has failed us in some sense, or the policymakers and the industry. And there are, of course, these new kinds of technological requirements in many industries now. They want to cut down on workers. They want to reduce the number. There's automation, and so they reduce the number of workers. And a lot of the work is care work, or work that is actually very hard to do. And I think the workplace is a I mean, it's not unique to us. I mean, but I somehow, for instance, all of us, I mean, I have seen this Korean movie called Parasite, or there is this other Netflix film called Squid Game. So, it's very interesting to see. And I'm very proud of the fact that, Korea is producing these amazing works that are willing to tell you, these are our problems. I wish we would make those kinds of artistic works, which would show the world, these are our problems. Because when you do that, then there's a chance to do something about it, right? If you say there's so much class, there's such a class society still operating, even though everything looks great, the class system continues. If we could say more openly, we have a caste system that continues. We have these kinds of gender discriminations. There's if you can, there's a nice film that came out of Kerala. It's called The Great Indian Kitchen. If you can watch that, it'll give you an idea. But of course, it's confined to the home, but at least it shows you some of the dynamics in the home. It doesn't show you enough about the dynamics outside, which I think Parasite and Squid Game show you more clearly. But we need more discussion about these things. And then I think educationists can also pick up the tab a bit more.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mary Chan. Yeah, I also watched the film Squid Games, the series Squid Games, and wow.
Yes. Yeah.
It was mind-blowing.
Well, it's number one in India, let me tell you.
Yeah. So we have a question here in our chat box from Geoffrey Cueto. Dr. Chan, thank you for your presentation. It was an eye-opener for us about the conditions of women in India. My question is, what are the government policy or policies which the government does that foster protection of women in India? So thank you for your response.
Okay. Well, thank you for your question. I would put it a little differently. I think your question indicates part of the problem. We do think in terms of protection. We think too much in terms of protection. So we want to have laws that protect women, that punish, that we have our criminal laws on domestic violence, on rape, are pretty okay. They're pretty good laws. A woman can go to the police station and even, and lodge a complaint. I mean, it's not easy to do, but it's available. It's possible. So I feel that the problem is partly that there has been too much talk of protection and not enough talk of policies that would be more enabling. That is to say, such that women could, find things to do that would give them a sense of purpose, a sense of, so that, you go out, you go to school, you go to college, you have a good education, and you can imagine a life beyond that isn't only about being protected, but is also about, having other kinds of opportunities. And that's where we have failed. I think the assumption that, all women need our protection. So make sure she has a good marriage. And if the husband is a little violent, then let's have good laws to deal with that violence and make him stop beating her up. But that's not enough of an answer. We do need to think beyond that. So I think that's where I think the policies are not there. We are demanding better employment conditions, better pay for the work that women do. Women are, paid very, very low wages when they do work of various kinds. In nurseries, we have workers, we have care workers in our health schemes, in our preschool schemes, thousands of them, and they're called voluntary workers. They're paid next to nothing. So we're demanding changes there. So those are the sorts of things we think are needed. Thanks so much for your question.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Jan. Well, I also support the suggestion of Dr. Park that we need to go back to education, because we believe that it is also through education that we'll be able to change the mindset of people. So for the Association for Theological Education in Southeast Asia, in the revised Critical Asian Principles, the APAMEI included in the fundamental concerns the issue of gender justice. Hence, the member institutions of APAMEI are mandated to integrate in their curriculum the study about gender justice. So if the North America has the feminist theology, and the Africans have their womanist theology, and the Latin Americans have their mujerista theology, here in the Philippines, specifically at Union Theological Seminary, where I am teaching, we have the babaylan and feminism. So it is our own Filipino brand of feminist theology rooted in the Filipino context and Filipino consciousness. So I think we really need to go back to the study of patriarchy, because sometimes defining patriarchy is like a fish trying to define water. So even women think that it's natural for them to live in that kind of habitat. So we really need to raise the consciousness of these people, to revolutionize the consciousness of the people, especially and specifically women, or else they will think that it's natural for them to be inflicted pain from their partners. So thank you very much, Dr. Jan. Now I am returning the presiding to our president, Dr. Flor Miranda, for the wrapping up. Dr. Flor.
Thank you, Doc Connie. May I now call on our Regional Hub Director from the Asia Pacific, from one regional director in the Philippines to another one in the Asia Pacific, Dr. Yang Min Paik, for announcements and closing prayer, please.
Okay, so let me give the final announcement. And I'm trying to say thank you very much, for the wonderful speaker. Let us give our hands, to Dr. Mary John, and for the wonderful things, and also all the participants, over here, and the organizers, and also great questions, we had together. And let us work on, for the more gender equality, fulfill the society, and that is our responsibility. And also, I'm asking all of you, please stay safe, within the COVID-19 pandemic. And now a lot of countries has been changing their policy, toward with Corona policy, and that is creating a lot of things. And also there was a serious news about the new variant of the COVID-19 we call the new, and which could be very dangerous. So I'm asking all of you, please follow the guideline and let us do our best, for the vaccination and for the disinfecting guideline. I want to give the big announcement for our next forum, happening in December. Okay, so let me show you what's going to be in. Okay, it's not going to be only professor is talking to you. Okay, what we are trying to do is we are trying to bring students from all different countries from our members. So we are asking with the theme of Christmas in the midst of the pandemic. So how we can celebrate our Christmas even within the pandemic, and what kind of thing you have learned, okay, from this pandemic experience, and how can we apply that one and still celebrate the spirit of Christmas. It's gonna be the 1 week before the third week. It's gonna be December 18th, not the last week, because last Saturday is Christmas. So we're gonna meet 1 week early, and which will be the December 18th. And hopefully all the professors, will ask you, to select some of the students to share your testimony about this topic and your experience. And then we're gonna celebrate that one together and remember the spirit of Christmas together in the next months. So thank you very much. And for your participation, once again, the great speaker. Let us have the little moment of prayer together to conclude this meeting. Thank you, God, for bringing us into your holy presence. And we have talked about and learned a lot what we need to do for more gender equal society. And you have enlightened us with your wisdom and with your guidance, and help us to follow your way, and so that we can be the channel of your love and your transformation for the better world in the world. And please bless all the people gathered here, and so that they could be the true God's instrument to make the society right, and to include the more women equally to the society, and so that we can moving toward your kingdom and something you want to build up in the midst of us. We are waiting for your coming on the Christmas, and please guide us and help us to be filled with that great spirit of Christmas in the coming months. I hope please protect us in this terrible pandemic, but still have positive mind and sharing our love to each other, even this difficult time. Thank you for your presence and guidance, and we pray in your great name, Jesus Christ, our Savior. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Dr. John. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Yang Min. Great, great prayer. Thank you, Nirja.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
I
so
enjoyed
much.
your session and your questions, really. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor John. Bye, Florida.
Dr.
Okay, sir.
Bye. Bye,
Thank
Connie.
you. See you next month
Everyone.
Yes.
Peace
on
be
May
with you.
First
18th.
Monday.